I would scratch a bit the surface about Frontend in Flixbus, and my content will like overlap with all the guys, basically from the Frontend side. And I will talk about how we scale Frontend, what challenges we have in there, and what are like lessons learned, the plans for the future, and what's the current status, basically, with all the stuff that guys already told you. So, to give this a bit of background, I will start with organizational changes with Flixbus Agile journey, actually, that Eric mentioned earlier. So, and like this will help you to have a bit of overview of why we're doing the things we're doing. So basically, the Agile journey. The key concept was that we want to split on independent and self-organized cross-functional teams and basically to have like the domain assigned for each team and to make teams feel fully responsible for that domain. So that was kind of the main ideas of that, and this like gives a bit of background and consequences that we needed to deal later, basically. So the Agile journey started, and basically why we were doing that, it's pretty obvious. Like we wanted to scale, like Flixbus has had a enormous growth in last several years, and we were barely keeping the pace, basically, in the technical terms and in terms of team, basically, the technical team. So the idea was to scale like the team and scale the architecture and to match them somehow. And here I need to mention like, again, why we wanted to do this, like, because it allows us to drive innovation better. Like, again, having the team own the specific domain makes it know it more and, like, deliver the higher quality features. And basically, maintaining the smaller parts is easier. And I will refer to that a bit like later. So here I also need to mention the Conway's law, which basically says that when organization starts to build the system, like it tends to come up with the decisions that basically mimic the system, the organizational structure in their system. So basically we wanted to map the current application on new team structure, and obviously we had some problems. And the biggest problem was basically the code that we come up with, the monolith, for several years of really high-paced development, high-paced like feature delivery. Like it was really difficult to scale that thing and to manage that thing. It was really unpredictable. Like so we basically like even had no other way to just do something with that. And you probably, like, splitting the monolith is a buzzword right now, so everybody is splitting the monolith, like it's a common thing, and you probably knew like the common patterns of what you can do with that. So like the first one, of course, that comes to your mind is microservices. Of course, like they're cool, you probably know about that. Here's a bunch of another buzzwords related to microservice. So autonomous, isolated, speed, like flexible, independent delivery, stuff like that. So, and this is pretty good, but the biggest problem with the microservices is usually it's only about the backend stuff. So you split your code with a bunch of APIs, the independent ones, and then just like build another front-end monolith on top to make things nice, and there you go. And this is not something we basically wanted to go with, so we did some research. So yeah, that's the front-end problem. And we've come up with something that Eric mentioned already, basically the concept of self-contained system. And the main difference of self-contained system approach is basically the microservice that includes the UI in it and the data as well, but I'm not touching this within my talk. So yeah, and like it's like pretty cool. Like we've assigned the domain of a set of domains to one self-contained system, like make the teams work on that self-contained system, like deploy them independently, like deliver new feature to really own the domain they're working on. But yeah, of course, it's not that easy. So there are some of the front-end related challenges that we came across. Basically, the first one is UI consistency. Christopher told about that. UI integration and cross-system interaction. So these are like probably one of the biggest things that we needed to think at first when planning to do basically the thing that we want to do. So I'll just go one by one, I guess. So first, the consistency problem, we've decided to solve that with design system. Like Christopher told a lot about design system, so I will not repeat him that much in terms of UI. I will just, like, again, we've built the Honeycomb. Basically, the Honeycomb is our version of design system, like our baby so far. It's not mature yet because like we're only covering some parts of design system, which is basically the like code, a bit of design and some rules. But of course, as we told a bit earlier, we need to include the like communication patterns, the animation, how the things behave. So like everything should be included in there. But you can't just do everything at once. I'll scratch that a bit later as well. So the Honeycomb. Let's talk a bit about what's that. So it's basically the company-wide design system. So we want to be like on that plate, not here. It's kind of doesn't look tasty. So this includes the shared component library. Some guidelines and best practices, because like especially when you try to integrate several independent systems on one page, you need to have some restrictions. Like you can rely on automation, so like something needs to be stated, like in standards, and you can check some of them with linters, basically the code style check and stuff like that. And another key thing of success within the company, like you need to make the teams feel attached to it somehow, and basically to contribute. So it's not treated like some third-party tool. Hey, from like next week, just use that for everything, and you will just deny the stuff you want to use it basically. So the internal open source idea is basically something that help us to keep the teams aware of what's going on in there, how it works, to like solve the resources problem, because one team like obviously can't serve like everyone, 28 teams, whatever, with all the components. It's like just impossible. Hey, we need this new component. Yeah, come in 5 months, we have roadmap plan. So that's not something that's gonna work for the company. And yeah, so how it helps us, again, this is something that Christopher mentioned. So this is a single source of truth. And as a consequence, basically, this improves this feedback loop. Basically, you have the same channel width, the communication channel, but you can discuss more because you are not talking about pixels, border colors, you are talking about primary CTAs, the input fields, the horizontal navigation, the like cinnamon orange color, something like that. Yeah, so, and this helps us to increase development speed, so not only the feedback loop, but developers don't need to start from scratch, basically, especially for the new systems and new features. This is also useful for prototyping. So we ensure the consistent look and feel with that, basically the initial goal of that, or at least like try to make it as best as we can. And yeah, with this internal open source idea, like this improves the community and cross-team communication that we have like, because the teams are pretty independent in the way of delivering stuff, like, we still need something to agree on, and this, like, sometimes can be something that unites us to discuss on, like, where we want to move forward the front-end technologies in Flixbus, basically. And what next? So a bit of like under the hood, what's going on in there? It's pretty simple. We haven't started with something like fairly complex because we just wanted to check the thing first and then like bet on it fully. So basically, the key things in there, that the library itself, like currently it's the framework agnostic thing. So it's just like plain HTML and plain like CSS, but Sass, whatever. So we didn't want to target some specific framework because, like, again, we don't have the limitation on technology level for the team. So we wanted to make it as wider as possible and to use the thing like as a base for future component libraries if we need to. So the library itself, like all code is component-based, so it's not like Bootstrap. Like Bootstrap tries to do some component splitting for their like CSS files, but here we have it like even more, kinda, and we try to store the like basically each component has the reference HTML that we use in documentation and the documentation as well in Markdown. So it's also cross-functional because we didn't want to depend on this guy over here. Like basically the documentation platform, we choose the static site generator for that, Hard.js, because like it was just fairly simple and easy to start. Now we have a bit of like problems with it. We've basically just overgrown the level of this thing, but still it suits our needs. So the key thing is that the documentation portal is separated. Like basically all the things are available without this thing. It's just an entry point for the user where you can check the documentation and basically like, where is it? And see that stuff. But everything is stored within the library itself. So we can port it to some other stuff like Gatsby.js, for example, for React lovers. And what else is going on in there? So build tools we have, like we've made it with Gulp because, yeah, just suited our needs. There are some linters in place to check especially for internal open source, it's crucial when you have like multiple teams developing same thing, you still need to maintain certain code style check and quality check and to catch at least some mistakes for that. So we have linters, basically ES linter for JavaScript, HTML linter for HTML, reference HTML, and style lint, I guess, or style hint, whatever, for CSS code. And again, the build system is kind of split from this, like the documentation portal and the library itself, because we like didn't want to build another monolith in here. So then we have the CI tools. Basically, we are fertilizing the FlixOS a bit, or at least try. So we have CI jobs in GitLab, CI scripts, and we just deploy the documentation portal to like Kubernetes. And one of the distribution points for the CSS files is basically the Amazon S3, so for the CDN. And testing tools, we use Gemini. It's the tool from Yandex. I'm not sure if you heard about that. It's like does similar stuff as browser stack and Sauce Labs. Basically help us do regression testing for the components. So the idea is when you change, like, for example, you try to add a new component so you won't break anything. So it basically compares the screenshots. And yeah, so what else? Basically, I've touched most of the stuff in here. So, yeah, BEM principles, we heavily rely on that, and we keep BEM style naming scheme for all the classes within the library. It helps us to maintain, like, to basically like overcome the biggest pains of CSS, which is specificity issues. So we try to keep this like really low nesting structure for CSS rules, like ideally just one class per rule. We heavily use modifiers, mixes to basically do some custom versions of the component. So we are like the maximum level of nesting basically set in linter, the style linter, and I guess it 2 or 3, probably 3, but usually we try to stick with 2. 3 just an extreme case that thinks that you need to fix something in there. Yeah, again, boot without linters, Gemini-based, versioned distribution. This is something that Christopher told a bit, and this is crucial, like for rolling out the thing for the teams, because like you don't want to break something on production, like if you roll out the new version of the system which is incompatible. So the version it, so basically CDN links are version, package integration of course is version, and even the documentation itself is versioned from like recent months. So basically you can switch and check the documentation for the previous version that you are using in your project. What else? Now let's talk a bit of UI integration. So with the concept of self-contained systems and the problems with UI integration, like two key approaches, I would say, that are suggested with this architecture pattern is basically redirect and so-called transclusion. So I'll just go briefly with each of them and tell about what it is. So basically, redirect is fairly simple from technological point of view. So basically, you can split your application on several steps, several pages, and then like make each page the domain of some certain team. So we'll have, I don't know, /search, /order, I don't know. Why am I whistling? Oh, yeah, that's better. / like success page, maps, something else, whatever. And this is probably the easiest way to integrate the systems, but it's awful for user experience. So that's why that is not something that you should heavily rely on. So like, because there are rare cases that you can use that, but probably some of the cases that I can mention is the user profile, for example. Like if it's an independent page and it's not integrated anywhere, like this form with details, addresses, payment details, stuff like that, so you can just make a separate URL, like, and make it a system on its own. So basically users just go there with a specific URL. So that's the redirect. The simplest one, transclusion, is basically the thing when you try to assemble, try is a key thing here, try to assemble the page from multiple pieces, like on the go basically, where the asynchronous XHR requests, so AJAX basically. So it gives us better user experience because there are like almost no limitations on what can you implement. You don't need to put the shopping cart on a separate page as the search page. It's definitely not something that you would like to do. But it's complex. And you have this like global scope issues with JavaScript. Like if you heavily rely on JavaScript code, like this is not just something that you can control. That you just have no guarantee that some developer in some certain team just like for some reason just decide to use some global variables and override another nasty developer, and then everything just crashes. So this is like some things, but you can fight with them. This requires some strict boundaries in terms of self-contained system stack. So, for example, if team wants to use React on some certain page and another team agrees to use React, and they should agree on React version, for example, or some common dependencies, because, like, obviously, of course, you can fetch it and you can maybe even try to make it work, but it will be slow and kind of difficult to maintain. So this is something about strict boundaries, and with strict boundaries, this introduces a bit of dependencies in there. And what else we have? Like, we can go with the React users know that, the component approach, so you can just split your application into components, make team be responsible for some certain components, and just use basically the native package distributions mechanism for the components integration, version them somehow. This is like pretty good. Again, it has very little limitations in terms of UI and UX. This like comes out of the box for React and Vue, for example. But this can possibly lead that you will end up with the front-end monolith. So you really need to like keep this thing in place and to really watch what's going on in there and use it carefully. So again, strict boundaries, the same thing as for transclusion, because you have multiple teams to contribute on one page, basically. And dependencies, same thing, yeah. What else? A basic answer is like there is no silver bullet in terms of which integration you need to go with. Like the current best guess from us is you need to communicate with UI and UX basically on where like can you find the balance like in between the front-end stuff and the UI stuff. Like sometimes it just like you don't have a big conversion rate drop, like if you do the redirect, for example, for the user profile, but you have a huge, like, I don't know, gain in terms of development speed and integration costs for the team that does the user profile. Like, if you can communicate with the UI UX guys and make it just separate. So, first thing, combine approaches. Like, keep in mind different options in terms of UI, UX. This is like currently something that we're trying to do and to experiment. Like, we didn't go with vanilla approach, the either one. Basically, we're trying to combine them. And the current status, the Honeycomb becomes adopted like, I don't know, like by the several teams, and we have some new requests each month, I guess, sometimes each sprint, like really depends on the season, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, so teams started seeing value of in design system, and this is actually one of the things that Christopher, not that thing. One of the things that Christopher mentioned when answered one of the questions in terms of rolling out the thing, like one of the biggest part of rolling out such an initiative is basically the organizational part. Like technical thing is just like maybe half, but sometimes even less. Like especially in a bigger organization, you will like experience lots of challenges in like convincing the teams, product owners, trying to make the components that they would like to use to kind of sell it at first, and then like become contributors of the thing, basically. So we've started the movement already we like even have a small problem that we can't keep up with the pace right now and to satisfy everyone. So the current stage is like we want to basically establish the contribution culture. So we have only several cases right now that external teams, other teams contributed to the design system. And in terms of integration, the current status is we extracted first components from the monolith. The current way that we do this is basically standalone React applications. So there are several cases. Basically, the application just renders itself. And it, at least one of it, the guys built their own React component library based on the framework agnostic thing that we provide, basically. And this is something that we want to just fetch into the Honeycomb at a later point and kickstart the React components. So that's our plan, the current plan. What else? More self-contained systems are in progress. Like currently, there is no question, at least if you want to start a simple project, like the question, should you use Honeycomb, is not there, so developers are convinced that that's the good thing. And this is like one of the major achievements for past year, basically, that we have. So now we need to provide the like high quality product, basically for them, the design system, so to make it even better together. So lessons learned. Already something that I mentioned, this like processes, organizational stuff, like you really need to change the mindset of developers and product owners to like convince them and to make them want to use such kind of thing. And this like a really huge part of effort. Then, of course, invest into building design system. We haven't found any downsides, I guess, so far. Then, yeah, recruit teams to participate in that and involve them in the feedback loop. This is useful on the early stage to have teams kind of attached somehow to the thing and to understand that they have components for their system in the roadmap for the next version. So, and they like can help you somehow and like really keeps them like waiting for the thing. So roll out gradually. Again, this is about the process thing, so you really need this success story somewhere, like some team with a small project, and just go gradually. So basically, like make it expand from team to team. What else? And yeah, make it work, then make it better. So don't be afraid of like rolling out the first version with just, I don't know, 5 components, whatever, and try to make it work somewhere, because like with every use case, you are receiving so much of additional information that you didn't even like think of, and this helps you to make the product better, basically. And I don't know like anything that was made in the first iteration that good, probably. So that's it, I guess. And questions? Yeah. I can answer question in Russian. No questions?
Could you provide examples of these self-contained systems that you have right now? How big they are? Yeah.
One of the recent examples is the search mask that Christopher and Luke was telling about. So basically, it's the like from something in between the molecule and organism in terms of atomic design level, but it's a component on its own. It gets represented on the front end with the search form only, but in fact there are lots of stuff going on behind the scenes. So the search is really complex, and the data there is complex. So this is like one of the examples that basically one of the like breakthrough teams right now that are really keeping the high pace and extracting those things from monolith. And React so far works pretty well for them, but we're still kind of on that stage that we are evaluating that, like if it's something that we need to spread. So right now it's a controlled experiment, so it's there, it's on production, and yes, some valuable data is gathered from there. Oh, and this is like basically the transcoded one, and we have a bunch of simpler ones, or like simple in terms of integration. For internal tools, like one of the biggest part of the company, like tech part, is the internal tools, the application that we use to plan the rides, to do the pricing, to track the buses, to track delays and stuff like that. So the application that is like sending the delay notification basically is also extracted to the self-contained system, and right now it also integrates into this backend monolith, the internal thing made with Bootstrap 2, I guess, like really awful. So as a separate standalone React component, basically. And we have a couple of more in progress, but those are the biggest ones on production.
Okay, and it's also for the backend part, so only the front end that is self-contained system?
Both backend and front end.
If you want to learn something about self-contained systems, there was a link on that page, on that slide. It's very easy to remember. It's scs-architecture.org. So there are lots of examples.
Yeah, so basically the concept of the system is you need to have these things together. So the teams basically own the thing from the very beginning, from the data till the button that user clicks.
Yeah.
So, and this is like how we currently want to proceed.
And the size boundaries, or the boundaries for the size is actually when you need more people than can fit in one team to manage that, then it's no longer a self-contained system.
Yeah.
Maybe the same thanks talk. Again, this is the question about self-contained systems. What to do if your workflow, as usual with UI, is go out of your SCS? So maybe boundaries not good architected, like you was thinking, like okay, that thing would be in my SCS, but then it appears that it's no.
Yeah, that's a mistake. Well, probably you will need to reset the boundaries, because you basically can't control, like if within the search form, imagine the search itself, that like autocomplete or date picker is just owned by some like other team, and they want to like iterate on that, add in some new features. Like you don't have the ownership of that product. So like setting the boundaries is the crucial thing for that, and we spent like a lot of time in there, and like in fact we are still deciding on some cases of where to cut that.
For me, it's a big question. For example, the problem on Facebook when they come up with Flux and Redux, like you have notification in different places on your page, and if you have 3 teams and you fix notification, or you would be responsible for notification, your team would be responsible. It doesn't matter, is it small component, so it's. But you know that UI is usually like such a complex thing, like a Facebook or editor, some editor. It's like interconnected. For me, it's a question how you would split it in SCS. And for example, if UX team would go with a proposal which would cross boundaries of SCS, it's.
Yeah, that's like first thing you need to communicate with UX, and as that's similar to what I was talking when they combine the different approaches. Like sometimes you can convince, like to shift a bit, like to sacrifice some like prettiness of user experience, or like the happiness, just a tiny bit. Don't look at me like that. And save lots of time for your team to just not do the and it's very good when you have a suggestion already, and it's not something, well, it's complex, I don't like that, let's figure out something else. So yeah, this is a complex thing, and the approach may not be good for every kind of application. So like if you have hundreds of different systems on one page, I don't know how you ended up like that, but in case so, then yeah, probably something different needs to be chosen. And in terms of notification, this should be provided by design system, and it's just a shared component with a pattern on like where to show it on the website, and there are basically no questions on a simpler level. So yeah, splitting the thing, it's the same as microservices basically, but there you need to decide on the backend level how to split the data, how to split the APIs, where should I get what, and how to make it all together. So
more simpler than this UI. It looks like it's mixed together everything.
yeah, and here also this Conway's law works basically. So when your organization structure is established, basically, then it's a bit easier because you have certain departments that like do certain things, and you have certain teams on the tech level that basically serve certain departments. So you are kind of sure that the planning department does planning and it doesn't do search or something like that.
You like don't need the toolbar, team don't need the team.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Anything else? No. Oh.
Yeah, I have the same question about name convention. Do you share the same name convention with designers, or you have your own?
Yes. Recent thing we named colors. So basically, like just talking about colors, we have several abstraction layers. So the first layer is colors are named by the color itself. So it's like avocado green, uranium green, like cinnamon orange, brick orange, and stuff like that. It makes us easier to communicate like with the colors and not exchanging the code. And the next layer, the very important one, is the utility layer, when basically in SAS you have something in the middle and you know that strawberry red is basically the danger color. It sounds weird, but it kind of makes the thing better. And like, for example, if somebody just uses your library and imported the SAS files with those variables, then they can just reuse this danger color, and they assure that danger color is the same like everywhere. And this is talking about colors and the elements. So far, yes, we don't have like several thousands of elements yet. So like we have some kind of names for them, and currently it's pretty easy to come up. Like, I don't know, horizontal navigation, call to action, error call to action. So it's kind of triggered. What is that? Maybe at some point we'll face some problems. Usually, currently, we are facing some issues when naming the variations, basically, for the buttons. But then, the good thing about that if you have problems with naming, with the buttons, then there's a high chance that something wrong with the buttons. Like if you have 12 types of buttons, then it really confuses the user. So this kind of things can help you to control the stuff that what you are doing. Like if you don't know how to name the button 8, then maybe let's get rid of button 8. So, and currently we have 4 types of buttons, I guess, and it's pretty like manageable to keep track of that. And same thing with all the form fields, so like success field, danger field, or the variation of the certain fields, basically.
And what about the structure of the components name? So do you apply some atomic principles, or you recommend some
Currently it's BEM style. I'm investigating a bit, there's the atomic BEM concept. And I'm thinking maybe we will like use that at some point, but currently BEMs serve us like pretty well, and we try to keep like those classes memorable, basically, that you really understand what's going on in there and what is this component for. So it's not like something weird, like the blue button. Like, why you need a blue button? Oh, it's a Facebook login, okay.
Live button.
Yeah, live button. Yeah, so apparently them and common sense.